Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playbook on WFAA Plus. Yours truly, Joe Trahan with the one, the only, the great Ed Werder. And Ed, my guy, do we ever have good things to talk about for Cowboys Nation? Because with the season hanging by a thread, one minuscule thread, one piece of worm spun silk turned out to be a pretty strong thread. Cowboys beat the Eagles 24-21 in stirring comeback fashion, matching history for the Cowboys. It was a 21-point comeback. It's only happened four times in the history of this team, but it happened when they needed it most. Cowboys saved their season. Ed, when you think about that game, there was so much that went on. I'm curious about just in a snap, what do you think first?
The thing that strikes me, the biggest takeaway to me was that really it was the defense that created the opportunity. For as maligned as they've been, for as much criticism as Matt Eberflus has endured in his first season as a defensive coordinator, to get 8 consecutive stops and twice take the football away from the Eagles, that allowed the Cowboys to be in position to go win the game with a couple of good drives.
I agree. Because we could and we will talk about Dak Prescott and George Pickens, but I do think it has to start with that defense because it's been what you and I have been talking about for weeks. You know, we implored Jerry to go and make that move, right? To go out and get a defensive presence who wouldn't only be good for this year,
Yeah.
but you could count on for the future. I think he made the right move. And now when you think about, that trio of defensive linemen with Kenny Clark and Osa Odigizua and Quinnen Williams, the big trade deadline acquisition, it has transformed this defense quicker than even I thought you could. I mean, I'm a proponent that you build your offenses and your defenses from the line out, right? Um, but man, I don't know about you. I didn't think they could turn it around this dramatically, this quickly.
Well, I think part of it is, just as a week before the season started when they were playing the Eagles in the opener, they traded Micah Parsons. And to me, that sent a really negative message to the locker room
Mm.
about how invested this ownership was, how invested the front office was in this season. Yeah, they got Kenny Clark back, a starting defensive tackle, but the basis for the trade was the 2 first-round draft picks, and it was sacrificing this season, or so the perception was, for the future. And I think when you go at the trade deadline and you trade for Quentin Williams, who's a superstar player, Micah, the equal of Micah among inside players, that you send the opposite message. You send a message of optimism of, hey, we believe in you guys. We can get this done. I think they probably didn't do enough early in the season in terms of the Arizona loss, the Carolina loss, probably going to come back and prevent them from making the playoffs. But they're 5-5-1, and every 5-5-1 team in NFL history since 1990 has made the playoffs. There's only been 3, but they've all made the playoffs, and one of them won a division. I don't think that's going to happen. The Eagles are too far in front. But I think not only did they deprive themselves of a unique talent at the beginning of the season, but then they provided themselves with an equally unique talent on defense in the middle of the year, and the corresponding messages have had the effect we've seen. They lost, were bad from the beginning of the year without Micah, and then they got Quentin Williams, and now they feel like they got a chance again.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So you're saying there is a chance. And listen, when you look at either ESPN or NFL's next gen stats, it's about a 10 or 11% chance. But it's kind of skewed in my mind because of the way this thing is coming about, and they just have to win the right games at the right time to keep the belief going. And there's some people who are thinking, oh, if they, the Chiefs are an AFC team and they might be able to get away and still have a chance if they don't beat them. And my whole point is no, they've got to ride this wave as far as they can,
Yeah.
right? And just try and keep pushing it down the way and trying to keep stack up these victories. And if you get to the end of the season when it's the Commanders and the Giants, all of a sudden, listen, there's a chance. I don't think it's a great chance because I think they will stumble at some point because this league is so difficult. And when you don't leave yourself any margin for error, it's just really difficult. It's really
But
hard to keep it going. But at least they've kept the season alive and they've kept interest in it, Ed,
yeah,
and with good reason.
well, and in terms of the analytics, you said what there's a 9-10% chance of them making the playoffs. Well, guess what? The analytics said there was a 1% chance of them winning that game yesterday too.
Right. That's right.
So
Yeah.
keep that in mind. Yeah, I mean, when it's 21-0, I'm like, we're going to do this show and we're going to be talking about the same game we've seen 10 other times this year. But no, we're speaking about a unique outcome, a positive development that could carry this team through the Kansas City game. I think we both felt like if they were going to do anything, they probably had to win at least 2 of these 3 games in 12 days against the Eagles, the Chiefs, and then the Lions. And that to me all started with beating the Eagles. Like if you beat the Eagles, maybe you prove something to yourself because now you've got the momentum that comes with winning consecutive games for the first time all year. Now you're coming off of a high of having beaten an opponent with a winning record. And so I think that has real value what they did yesterday.
No, I totally agree, Ed, because the way I put it earlier today is the Cowboys now have the most important currency that they can have. And that currency is belief, right? Because they didn't just beat, a Jets team or a Giants team or a Raiders team. They beat the defending world champions, albeit a team that has struggled offensively, but they weren't struggling offensively early in that game. And the Cowboys were still able to turn things around with a defensive front that has been just fun to watch. And, I do think we need to at least give the Cowboys credit for doing this because I think it would have been easy for them at the trade deadline to try and get a just a pass, an edge rushing end, a traditional edge rushing end to try and replace what Micah brought. But bringing in a defensive tackle when you already had Osa Odigizua, when you already had Kenny Clark, both making north of 20 million, to bring in Quentin Williams, has turned out to be, I'm not going to call it a stroke of genius, but it's darn close, Ed, because they're now generating pressure straight and directly into the lap of these quarterbacks. And it is the most difficult pressure to handle. Now, it's been Geno Smith and it's been Jalen Hurts. So I would say they are literally taking steps up the ramp, and they're about to go all the way to the top as they get ready to take on Patrick Mahomes. But they have had, a good runway to lead to this Thanksgiving litmus test that will really kind of tell us all, okay, is this real? Is this sustainable? How good can they be against a Chiefs offense that hasn't been great, but we know Patrick Mahomes can be.
Well, the thing that's held the Chiefs back is they haven't won 1-score games, right? They won their first 1-score game yesterday. It was a game almost identical to what happened with the Cowboys. They were down in the fourth quarter by double digits at home, and they come back and win the game. And going into Thursday's game, Patrick Mahomes and Dak Prescott are 1-2 in the NFL among quarterbacks in passing yards. And the challenge for this defense now is you're playing the most dynamic quarterback in the game right now. And the week after that, you're on the road, you're playing the most dynamic running back in football in Jahmyr Gibbs. So 2 different challenges, but beyond what you mentioned, which I think was a big point of emphasis last week in our conversation about pushing the pocket, the instant inside pressure and the value of that. I mean, Dak Prescott confirmed that that's what he dislikes the most as a quarterback. Blocks your field of vision. You feel it right away. You feel like an urgency to get rid of the football, leads to mistakes. So all of that has real value. But look at what they've done stopping the run, right? When Jerry Jones and Stevens sat up there and talked about the Micah Parsons trade and why they wanted Kenny Clark and they had to have a defensive tackle in this deal, that was it. They wanted to be able to stop the run. And it's taken them signing Oso Digizua as a priority free agent in the offseason, acquiring Kenny Clark, and now getting Quentin Williams. But they've done it. I mean, Ashton Jeanty was the 6th pick in the draft. The Raiders have a bad offensive line. The Eagles were the best running team in football last year. They have offensive line problems this year. But Saquon Barkley, 10 carries for 22 yards. The last 2 weeks, Joe, 30 carries for 90 yards. That's the 4th best in the league in the last 2 weeks of the season. So, and Kansas City doesn't run the football well. In fact, for most of the year, Patrick Mahomes has been their leading rusher. He's not anymore, but he's been their leading rusher. So, yeah, I think it was They wanted Quentin Williams. They wanted Quentin Williams when they decided they were going to solicit offers from Micah Parsons back in training camp. They wanted Quentin Williams. So now they got him. It was a targeted move, and incredible value he's brought to them in a short space of time.
Well, I just think it's incredible, right? Because, you mentioned Ashton Genty is a great back behind a bad line. But Saquon Barkley, even with a compromised line without Lane Johnson in that game, is still Saquon Barkley. We haven't seen enough of it this season because of some of those offensive line struggles, but still, he had a long of 7 yards. He also had a 5 yard carry. Other than those two carries, he didn't have another carry that was more than 2 yards. Saquon Barkley. I
And
mean, just amazing that the Cowboys could put a cap on him like that. I don't care how bad the offensive line is, with what we've seen from this defense, for them to turn things completely around and have that kind of outing in this kind of circumstance was more than remarkable.
and look at the way they played Jalen Hurts in week one versus how they played him yesterday. Yeah, he had 2 touchdowns on a tush push and a 2 yard, quarterback sneak or draw, whatever it was. But he did not get out of the pocket
That's
and
right.
hurt him running the football on scrambles for first downs like he did the first time. So they not only stopped the running back, they stopped the running quarterback.
Yeah, and that's been something that we have seen the Cowboys struggle with for years, not just this particular, iteration of their defense. So it is just it's been amazing to see what has happened once you solidify that middle. And it's like all sports. When you're strong up the middle, you can be strong. It's the same with baseball, right? When you got a good catcher, good pitcher, shortstop, second
Shortstop.
baseman, and center fielder, when you're good up the middle, you can be great, right? And that defense with DeMarvion Overshone coming back as well, Logan Wilson, who we haven't seen a whole lot of splash plays from, but perhaps it's not even about the splash plays, Ed. Perhaps it's about just getting everyone together and on the same page to where you just don't have the busts. Because
Yeah.
that's the other thing that we haven't seen as much, the all-out bust. There were a couple times in yesterday's game where the left offensive flat was completely uncovered, and I don't know how the heck that happened. But outside of that, I mean, it was sound. But if somebody gets beat, they get
Right.
beat,
That
right?
happens.
Yeah, it's the NFL, right? The offenses are going to do that, but for it to be coordinated, for it to be functional, remember when I begged for them to just be functional? Well, they're more than functional now, right? Because they won that game. Because if they don't, hold the Eagles at bay for those 8 straight possessions, there's no way that that offense has a chance to get back in that game. And I mean, think about that, Ed. 8 straight possessions when for most of this season, that defense couldn't stop a team from scoring for 8 consecutive plays. And now we're talking 8 possessions. It's phenomenal. I'm happy for Cowboy fans, right? And I'm not saying that this means that they're gonna win out and get to the playoffs.
Right.
They have a real chance. They have a competitive chance now to do some things in a league that is built on parity and is filled with parity right now. I mean, I look at what happened with the Lions having to eke out a win against the Giants, right? I mean, just some things you just don't expect, and it's how this league works. And if you just put yourself in the position to where you could compete, and you've got a quarterback like Dak Prescott who's playing his best football, and you get in these close games, that will allow you opportunities to win these games. Again, full transparency. I still don't think that means that they're going to make the playoffs this year, but they have certainly given themselves more than a puncher's chance.
And we knew that next year the emphasis was going to have to be on, yeah, you want to keep George Pickens, obviously, and you want to keep Javante Williams. They're both on expiring contracts. But for the most part, we felt like they were going to have to make a big commitment to building a defense, right? Well, now you've got the guys on defense to build around with the 3 defensive tackles, with Deron Bland, with Logan Wilson. So with DeMarvion Overshone. So they're, even if they don't make the playoffs this year, they've done something foundationally to prepare for the next few seasons beyond this to be a competitive defense, or maybe more than that.
Yeah, no, they've got the best defensive core, since Q was here, since Dan Quinn was here. And you're right, Ed. I mean, I think it's the makings of a defense that can be impactful and help turn, games around. And speaking of turning around, I do want to pivot now because I do want to talk more about that offense, right? Because Dak Prescott continues to have his best season as a pro, in my estimation. There's a level of poise and ability to get the best out of others around him when CD Lamb isn't dropping footballs. that is re that is really interesting to watch at this point. And I think we have to start now with, this switching of the number one receivers in the Cowboys receivers room because George Pickens isn't just the best receiver on the Cowboys right now. He's one of the one or two or three best in the entire NFL with the way he's playing right now. Dak Prescott has helped unlock that in George Pickens. And I do give CD Lamb an assist in that regard
Yeah.
because I think there's a comfort level that CD does help provide for George Pickens, who is mercurial and still, I think, in some ways immature as a football player. But Dak and CD have found a way to surround him and put their arms around him to get the absolute best that young man has to offer. And his best is near the best in the NFL.
Yeah, the question is, what's happened to CeeDee Lamb? Right, he's had a bad year. I mean, um, when he was out of the lineup, I think George Pickens demonstrated to Dak Prescott that he is a true number one receiver who can run
Yep.
all the routes, who can play in a variety lineup in a variety of positions, and can be completely trusted. And it seems to have. I just think there's a psychological component to what we're seeing with CD. Obviously, the two can get along great. I mean, they got disciplined last week because they were out together and broke curfew, right?
Yeah, they're
So
great friends. They're
they
great
get
friends.
along off,
Yes.
but CD just doesn't seem to have adapted well to somebody else. There's somebody else now that Dak trusts with the football as much or more. CD's not just the main guy anymore, and he can get that status back. I still think he's a great player. I thought it was interesting though yesterday when I asked Dak Prescott after the game about this subject, and he mentioned that CD's pressing. He's seen CD press before, and he knows how he feels when he's not playing well, and he puts more pressure on himself, and that is not healthy, and it doesn't create the result you want. And so that's what his conversation with CD is going to be about. And then, Schottenheimer said, hey, he's an outstanding player. He's an incredible player. And I can tell you right now, when I start drawing up plays for the Kansas City Chiefs, I'll tell the Chiefs right now, a lot of the times the ball's going to 88. But he's got to make plays. He's got to justify that. But he does seem to be adversely affected in terms of his role in the hierarchy of the offense.
Yeah, you're right. And I think, listen, he sees like all of us see, what Pickens is doing. And I think, CD Lamb can't help but see himself as the alpha on the team. And I'm sure he's trying to, make some of those big plays to put his alpha stamp on it. But it's like anything, Ed. At some point, the game asks you to let the game come to you. And I haven't had a chance to see the all 22 from this game, but I'm actually looking forward to looking at it because I'm curious to see, how much defenses are tilting towards CD. There were a couple of coverages where I could tell they were, and my interest is when is that going to swing to Pickens? And if and when it does, I'm hoping that someone in that building, and maybe it is Dak Prescott, maybe it's Dak and Shotty together, can make CD understand, hey man, just be patient. Do what the game asks you to do because there's gonna be a time when if they try and take him away, you're gonna just flourish,
Yeah.
right? And don't feel like you have to do other things in the meantime that could sacrifice just how good you could be. And I think that's kind of what we're dealing with. I mean, he's got 8 drops. 8 drops, Ed. And I heard you say it on the morning show. I mean, that's the most for a Cowboys receiver since Des Bryant in 2012,
2012. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's
To me,
unfathomable.
to me,
You,
that's the thing.
you
Like,
never think that.
it's not that he's not getting open. It's not that he's not getting opportunities. Dak targeted him 11 times in the game, but he went 4 for 11. And there were some obvious drops, including the one in the end zone where he seems to be suggesting Dak did not properly locate the football for him, right?
Well, and that was a
And
really interesting part, Ed, because if you looked at that, there was a defender who flashed in front. And if Dak throws it any more to the outside, like CD seemed to be calling for, it would have been an easy
it was a
interception
perfect throw. He just dropped the
for the
ball. He's frustrated. He's trying to blame somebody else.
so it's just at some point, and listen, it's hard, but at some point you have to show emotional maturity. And I think,
That's
that
always been a challenge for him.
it has been, and and part of it is that diva receiver mentality, right? And I think both those guys have it, and it could be a superpower, right? But it can also be detrimental if you can't control it. And I don't know, because it's hard, right? Because now Dak, has both of those guys, right? And so when he goes and talks to CD, and listen, they've had a really solid relationship, but they haven't had a perfect relationship, right? I think back to the playoff game, when they couldn't get together at the beginning of the playoff game, they ended up getting blown out because you're looking at these two guys who had been great all season 2 years ago, and then you get to a playoff game, and it was like that one was reading English and the other was reading Spanish, and they had no clue how to get on the same page. So I just I don't know who in that building can get in CD's ear and just say, "Hey, man, just chill out. It's going to come back your way. You're too good for it not to."
That sounds like shoddy to me.
I hope so. I hope so. And perhaps he is the guy who could do that, because I do think, through everything that they've been through with Marshawn Nealon, Shadi has pushed all the right buttons. And I do think that those guys trust him. The fact that he is, really open with those guys, and he gives those guys a lot of say so in what they do. And from what I understand, that the Players Council is very strong on this team now, and has a lot of say so, and they run a lot of their own meetings and everything. So I think that's all a plus, and somebody just needs to sit CD down and say, "You're good. Just just wait. It's coming." And if you do, it'll be bigger than you could ever expect. And
Yeah,
I hope it does happen.
but he's got to produce, right? When he gets the opportunity, he's got to produce. If Dak goes 4 of 11 to one guy and 9 of 9 to the other guy, when it comes to when it's game time, guess who he's going to go to?
Yeah, and listen, the numbers don't lie. And Next Gen Stats came out, and Dak and Pickens are the
Yep.
top-rated duo. What was the quarterback rating? 134 is their quarterback rating together. I mean,
Yeah.
just off the charts, right? And then
Better than Mahomes to Kelsey.
right,
It's better than Darnold to Smith and Jigba. It's
yes,
amazing. Yeah.
number
I
one,
think the only other Cowboy combination on that list is Ferguson
yes,
and
and
Dak.
and they're the best tight end QB duo
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
that list. So listen, man, Dak continues to cook, and now I just I I'm curious to see where it goes. The interest level in the last 3 weeks, Ed, because it was waning, right? I mean, this team had just become predictable, hard to watch,
Yeah.
dysfunctional. Didn't look like they belonged on an NFL field at times, when that defense would get on the field, to now intriguing, interesting. Quinnen Williams off the field has been just this revelation, because when you and me and all the other media members talk about how this guy came and sparked this turnaround defensively, he's in the locker room saying, hold on, I'm one of the guys here,
Right.
right? It's just we're more focused, we're more attention, paying more attention to detail, and he just has that way about him, to make it about the team, and that's only going to help them down the stretch as well and into the future.
Yeah. And apparently he was involved in the halftime, speaking to players and rallying guys and making them believe. I thought that was the greatest line from Dak yesterday, was that all game long he was telling guys to believe, 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 and then late in the game they're starting a possession, and Tyler Booker, the rookie, says to him, "Believe," and he goes, "We're past believe. I know now. I
Yeah.
know we're going to win this game." So
Yeah, and that's when it gets good. That's
leadership.
when and that's when sports becomes, that's the reason you play it, right? And when they get a little taste of that, let's hope that they understand what it means, right? Because the next hurdle is more difficult in my estimation, right? Because what we saw against the Eagles, Ed, was what I like to call the desperate team theory. And in the NFL, you've seen it a million times. It works a lot. I'm not a betting man, but I throw that out there. If you are, think about the desperate team in some
Who needs it
situations.
the most? Who's
Who
the most
needs it the most?
motivated?
Right. Eagles come in 8-2. Yeah, they had some issues in the locker room, but
They
they
got
know
the
they've
biggest
got
lead in
leeway.
all of
Yes.
football. Yeah.
Right. And they know it. And there's something about, being that good and trying to get to your best level when that other team is like, oh my God, it's do or die. It's like if we don't do it this way, we have no, we have nowhere else to go. And with the talent that's on that team now, you saw it come out in the wash. But here's the hard part. 72 hours later, after you've kind of let it go through your system, you got to get to that level again because I would still submit to you that if this team doesn't play maximum effort, especially that offensive line, it's going to be difficult. It
And
will be difficult. Chris
and
Jones
the
will wreak
Chiefs
some
are in
havoc.
much the same predicament, right? The
Yes.
Chiefs are battling for their
Yes.
this team has been to the AFC Championship game all 7 years, and Patrick Mahomes has been the starter and been to 5 Super Bowls. They're in a desperate situation to try to get themselves into the postseason. And guess what? Next week, the Lions, when you play them,
That's right.
they're third in their own division, and they had the best record in football last year. So they're going to be in that same mindset. So it's going to be a couple of weeks before you get anybody that's not going to be equally desperate. So be prepared for that.
The one thing, and this actually just crossed my mind. Here's hoping that the Cowboys were able to flush that feeling that they had at the beginning of that Eagles game because you could tell it felt like they were all pressing. It felt like all they were just pressing and they weren't playing good football. And that,
It was the worst football they played in a bad year. That was the worst they played. Was the first
that's
half.
right. And it was interesting how they were able to modulate and just realize we're fine. We're fine. And let's hope that they learned something from that, and when we're in the locker room tomorrow, that might be one of the questions I'll ask, right? What did you learn from that bad start and your ability to quickly turn it around with your season on the line? How do you bring that into this Chiefs game? Another, like you said, I mean, it's going to be desperation, high intensity. They got 2 national games coming up on Thanksgiving, then the following Thursday night on Amazon Prime, nationally televised game. So it'll be the same feeling, the same sense, the same bigness, if you will. But I want to know what they have to say about that because I think there might be some interesting things there, and it might help the Cowboys as they go into that Chiefs game.
And we're almost out of time, so we can't talk about Brian Schottenheimer and all the questionable game management decisions that he made, which is not entirely, unexpected when it's a first-time head coach. He's never had to do this. Yeah, he's called plays before, but he's never decided when to go for it, when to punt, when to throw the red challenge flag. Hey, let me tell you, Brian Schottenheimer, when Ryan Flanoy says he touched a punt and they got penalized for roughing the kicker, throw the red challenge flag. Trust your player.
And here's the other thing, Ed. They have 2 challenges. Listen, if you were down to your last
He hasn't
challenge,
used it at all.
I know he hadn't thrown one yet, but you have 2.
Yeah.
You have 2. You could have afforded to lose that one. You absolutely could have. And here's the crazy part, Ed. Those of us who've watched a ton of football like you and I have, I was watching it here at the office, and I heard that double thunk that is unmistakable. And I'm sure because there was too much crowd noise, they didn't hear it, right? But anyone who's watched a lot of football, who saw it on TV, and I just went, he had to tip that because I heard the sound. But
And
then
it
I
was
started.
that important. Like, it
Oh
was
yeah,
that important. You just
yeah.
gave him a touchdown on the opening possession by going for it at midfield on 4th and 3 after watching Dan Campbell and Lions go 0 for 5 against this very same defense last week. You go for it. They go down and score. Now you block a kick and get called for roughing. You don't get the possession. They go down and score on that too. And then he didn't, kick the field goal when they were down there at 4th and 2 after they turned him over on special teams. Should you have kicked the field goal there? Like he said, and where we started this conversation, the defense bailed me out.
Yeah, they did. There's
Who would
no
have
doubt
ever
about
thought
it.
we would hear the coach or the quarterback say that in this season?
Hey, it's the NFL, right? You never know how it's going to play out. Give it a month. Things change. And in the Cowboys case, things change remarkably. Unbelievable stuff. But listen, they've kept it interesting, which is all you and I can ask for because Cowboy fans have every reason to be engaged. And we'll see what they got Thursday against the Chiefs. The fastest 30 minutes in all of football, Ed Werder. We did it again. That's
How
the
about it?
playbook. And there's one other name that we didn't mention that we should in the last 15 seconds. Elijah Clark. We've got a story coming up at 10 o'clock on WFAA. It's amazing. His play to force that fumble, inspirational stuff. Make
It
sure you
is an
watch us at
amazing
10.
play. It
Just great stuff.
defines what a football player is supposed to play like. You talk
Two,
about Marshawn Nealon playing with that energy and that relentlessness. That's what Elijah Clark did.
2 words on that play: football player. And it was fun to watch. All right. Always fun to hang out with you, Ed. Great stuff as always. The insight is fantastic. We will see you next week on the Playbook right here on WFAA Plus, Monday at 7 o'clock.